welcome to episode what I believe to be 76 of the Trainer Scoop podcast. In this episode, I'm very happy to be welcoming Mr. Eric Wu. Eric, say what's up to the people real quick.
Hi guys, what's up? Formerly or currently known as Mr. Zero RIR, but
Mr. Zero RIR. So Eric, he's been in the gym for a long time. We were just discussing that. So long time in the gym. Dude's got a ton of knowledge. He's a personal trainer, former college athlete, and physique athlete to be. So Eric, I'm going to hand it over to you, man. If you want to introduce yourself to the people, let them know a little bit about the man behind Zero RIR.
So guys, I'm a personal trainer. I think about this will be year 8 in the industry. Mostly coaching general population, working with general population. I was actually a physical therapy school dropout, so I have my undergrad degree, a bachelor's of health sciences. Was supposed to go to PT school. I actually finished about half of it. Decided it really wasn't for me, and then quickly dived into the personal training realm. It's been a pretty awesome ride since there. I definitely spent some time in the trenches in commercial gyms, and ever since then, I have graduated myself sort of to the boutique studio, which this might be controversial, but if you're general population and you're trying to get in shape, I don't think you need a commercial gym. I think you actually just need a small training studio or literally a squat rack, some dumbbells, and an adjustable bench, and that's it. But that's my hot take.
Agree, dude. No, agree 100%. What I used to do like a while back was I kind of opened up my own little studio and I had the basics, man. Like I had a squat rack, adjustable dumbbells, a bench, some boxes that I would stack to make an incline bench, a functional trainer, leg curl, leg extension, back extension. That was it. And got people results. So that's I agree with that sentiment. And dude, appreciate you for telling the people a little bit about yourself and for taking time to come on the podcast in the first place. I haven't got into an episode where I talk like in the trenches, personal training and training in a minute. It's been kind of like out there philosophical stuff and
Gotcha.
and some client interviews lately. So I'm really excited for this one just because like I have so much passion. I can tell from the way you post, from the way you train, from the physique updates that you post that you have a ton of passion for this stuff too. So I
Yeah.
am excited to get into it, man. Yeah, like we were just talking before we press record, the physique is going crazy these days. So tell the people a little bit about like your training, your goals, all of that stuff.
So first of all, of course, thanks for having me on. So I came from a powerlifting background, and this started probably 2013, 2014.
Were you like
Was
big into like the YouTube scene of powerlifting back then?
Yes, I was. So Johnny Candido,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
want to
everybody,
say
bro.
Nick Wright,
Yeah.
followed him. Brandon Campbell, also him. Pete Rubish was big in the day. I tried to lift like Dan Green, failed miserably. Um, yeah, those were kind of like my even like Max Tuning. I used to watch his videos. Big IIFYM sort of influence. So, but I started powerlifting 2013, 2014, and around that time, so kind of like not to plug myself, but some of my best numbers were I've deadlifted cheater sumo 565, and this is coming from a former sumo puller. I squatted, I think my best in college at the time, I think I hit 405 for a double. And my best bench press was, I think, 300 flat. I could never bench for shit. And that was all done at a body weight of, I want to say, 188 pounds. Um, I
Damn.
did one push pull meet during that time. And I think during that time, I totaled, it was like a 285 bench and like a 500 deadlift. It was one of those events that I kind of like walked into. My girlfriend at the time was like, "Oh, hey, this is going on today. You should do it." And I was like, "Okay, let's do it."
Hell yeah.
And if you guys see me wear a hammer strength shirt, that is actually the push pull meet that I won that at. So that shirt's been around for a long, long time. I filled it out before, and I still fill it out now, but just not in the stomach anymore. So I guess that's kind of a win. But I think So around 20, like late 2014 into 2015, I sort of realized my body comp just wasn't at a point that I wanted it to be because I was like college dining hall food, and just having such easy access to food all the time. So I went from like a decently lean, high 180 to like a kind of chunky, low 200s. And I didn't really like how I looked. And then back in the day, I was under the wrong assumption that high reps were good for fat loss. So I pretty much did a lot of repetitions under a very short rest time. Was running, like doing, we had a track in our school up on the third floor of our gym. So what I would do is like sprint the straightaways, walk the curve, sprint the straightaways, walk the curve a bunch of times. Like I would aim for like 8 or 9 times and then just walk a couple laps after that. So like big into hit cardio, probably overdoing that, and also kind of like, I guess, tone zone, like squeezing the pink dumbbell sort of workout. So um, I did follow structured powerlifting training. I ran like Smolov, probably not the best idea, but Candido's linear strength sort of program that was in the rotation a bunch too. And I actually got some pretty good results on that, from those two programs. And kind of going into 2015, and this was a little bit of a blessing. I got my wisdom teeth out in 2014, and got my wisdom teeth out. Couldn't trade for like 2 days, no big deal. And then like after that, like I think it was like 2 to 3 days that I couldn't lift weights, and then after that, it was like I could lightly train. Of course, I didn't do that, but from 2014 to actually late 2015, I would just have debilitating reoccurring sinus pain like up here. And I always wondered like why the hell that was going on. And come 2015, kind of after my exit from powerlifting, that summer between I think it was my junior, my senior year, I realized that the when they extracted my wisdom tooth, the root had actually grown into my sinus. So there was an actual like hole between my mouth and my sinus, and I was getting like recurring sinus infections, which really wasn't great. So the summer of 2015, I actually had to go back under the knife and get that hole plugged. And that was a little bit more of a lengthy operation in terms of like how long it took me out from the gym. So it was, I want to say it was at least a week or 2 weeks where I was primarily drinking liquids. And I had already cut from, I think my first pseudo diet was like from 205 to about like 190. And I looked decent at 190. And then from those 2 weeks, I think I went from 190 pounds to 175, 178. And that was when I first, like, I got like the V cut abs, but I probably lost a fair bit of muscle during that time too. But I got like the V cut abs. I'm like, oh shit, I look emaciated, but I look pretty fucking good right now at the same time too. And after that, I was like, okay, I'm going to switch to mostly bodybuilding style training. And during that time, like 2015 to 2016, still didn't really track anything, no macros, no nothing, that sort of stuff. I ran a 6-day split. It was legs, chest and back, shoulders and arms, legs, chest and back, shoulders and arms, like 1 day off. Got a fair bit of progress from doing that, and I was kind of like the intensity guy, so it was like I was taking every single set to concentric failure. Like I was big into front squats at the time, so I would do like 15 to 20 rep front squats, and that was probably, in retrospect, it built some like grit, but in terms of like actually building muscle, it was like, it wasn't that great. During that whole entire time, I was always under the impression that I was like, if I can lift a fair bit of weight with my legs, I had decent leg musculature, which now I know is completely false because I can't hit any of my numbers that I did from my powerlifting days, but my legs are twice as big. And I don't know if you actually know this, but so that was 2015 to 2016. Like the spring of 2016. I don't know if you know who Frank Yang was back in the day,
I'm not familiar.
but he was this like kind of crazy Asian dude. He was pretty jacked. He was like, but his coach at the time was Cameron Lambert. And I don't want to like necessarily throw anyone under the bus, but I was actually coached by Cameron Lambert so I was actually coached by Cameron Lambert for about like 2 years or so. it was just like straight up bro split style of training. And I responded pretty well to it because that was the first time I would say, like, summer of 2016 was the first time that I actually tracked macros and whatnot. So, but this wasn't, this was the opposite of science based lifting. It was like 4, 5 sets of everything. And then what I realized was I was used to training to failure, but then I'd go into these leg workouts and it would be like squat, RDL, leg extension, leg curl, walking lunge, calf raise, and then ending with abs. So then like
Yeesh.
I realized from like a very, very quick point, it was like in those 2 years, training failure really kind of wasn't a thing. I was just trying to pace myself through the workouts. It was more about getting through the workout than necessarily like taxing each muscle group. Nevertheless, if any of you guys are that involved in my history and want to scroll back all the way to 2016, that was like my first sort of diet. And I think I got from like high 190s all the way down to like 178. And I was like shredded at the time. Definitely developed a little bit of like an eating disorder. And like in hindsight, this happened over the course of the summer. So from May all the way to August of 20, I want to say, I think 2016 or 2017, one of those years. But definitely developed a little bit of like an eating disorder and kind of like realized I was like, I almost at the end, I was like, I'm not playing a step on stage. Like, why the hell am I getting this lean? But from 2016 to about 2018, I was with Cameron Lambert. And I think the biggest takeaway that I got from that was tracking macros on a consistent basis. And that I'm a fan of tracking macros a lot. I don't think I could ever graduate away from it. I'm very, very type A and I just enjoy the structure a lot. And then come 2018, there was a little bit of a gap in coaching during that time where I kind of just ran my own thing. And I realized how ADHD I am. I can't pursue, if left to my own devices, I want to be strong, I want to be jacked at the same time, and I want to do both in the same session, which probably isn't a good idea, right? So I was I was doing stupid stuff like deadlifting 405 for 12 and then trying to do the rest of my leg workout after
Fuck.
that. Wasn't yes, yeah. But I think actually there was one session where I hit like 455 for 8, and like 6 for 3 sets of deadlifts, all pretty close to failure. And then I had like Smith machine squats and like leg press after that. So I had programmed myself that. So and during that time, around like 2018, I had ballooned all the way up to about 215, 218. And then I actually discovered my previous coach, Tiago Vasconcelos, and he's a research writer at Renaissance Periodization, and he is where my current physique I think currently is from. Higher volume approach, starting each mesocycle. He taught me RIR, a very, very more sustainable approach to dieting, where it was definitely more of a coaching experience than whatever I had with camp. And learning RIR, proximity to failure, like accumulation to deloads, all that sort of stuff, and incremental loading on movements, and pretty much everything that you see nowadays, like in the Mike Israetel Renaissance periodization sort of stuff, like that was the stuff that I learned. So from 2018 all the way until 2023, I was under his tutelage, and that was, I would say, the bulk of the progress that I probably made. I will say I probably wasn't training to actual 1 RIR during those early years because I trained hard, but I think after 2 years of learning to pace myself through workouts, I'm still doing that a little bit more. And then COVID hit in 2020, and this is my apartment. I share a 1-bed apartment with my girlfriend, and at the time I had a split squat stand, an adjustable set of dumbbells, a bench, a pull-up bar, and I think some bands and like a glute hamstring trolley. So during that time, I was like, the heaviest dumbbells that I actually bought, they're still fucking here, and I need to get rid of them. But they're a pair of 65-pound dumbbells. So I had the Bowflex 525s, So Bowflex dumbbells up to 52 and a half pounds and then a pair of 65s. So the whole entire time that we were locked down in Massachusetts, being Massachusetts, we were locked down for a fair bit of time. So
When did
it
you
was
guys
from like,
reopen?
it was like,
You
I
remember?
want to say, I want to say it was like from March all the way to probably like September or
Yeah.
something like
I
that. And
lived
like,
in New Jersey and it was like September
yeah,
7th.
yeah,
And,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
Ohio, where I'm from originally, was like May 27th.
Yeah, yeah. So during that time, and like even gyms were open like late August, but I was just like, I can't really be asked to like work out with a mask on because like this was still in the early phases where everybody was just in surgical masks, and I was like, I can't breathe in this shit, you know. So that I would say quarantine was probably pretty transformative because I had a really, really bad hip injury, trochanteric bursitis, if you will.
Yeah, yeah.
And I had the degree of lateral hip pain that I had was so bad to the point that like sitting for more than 30 minutes couldn't do it, sleeping on that side couldn't do it. And it was so bad that when I went to extend my knee, it actually inhibited how my quad was working. So when I went to do like a knee extension movement on that right side, I don't know if I had like femoral nerve involvement or just because everything was so inflamed that my quad kind of shut off. But every time I went to extend my knee, I wouldn't feel my quad. I would just feel shooting pain in my IT band and my lateral hip. Wasn't optimal. Pretty much during the tail end of 2019, all the way through quarantine, I couldn't really train legs. But I started working a ton on foot stability, and as much shit that Squat University gets, some of that stuff actually helped me. In particular, and I know these guys are called Prescript, Killian Hamilton, Muscle Doc, and whatnot, but learning the ability to do like hip airplanes and like single leg RDLs and like Bulgarian split squats, that was like the saving grace to sort of getting my stability and mobility up to the point where I was actually able to train again. And that on top of just pretty much hammering Bulgarian split squats all throughout quarantine as well as single leg RDLs. So it was good because on two fronts it allowed quarantine was actually pretty good. I don't think I'd be the lifter right now if it wasn't actually for quarantine, but it allowed me to rehab my hip, develop just a shit ton of like single leg stability. So when it came to doing things on two legs again, I was like, oh shit, this is so easy. And also at the same time, it taught me how to get more out of less weights, and that was when I was following, I think, Mike Israetel and Charlie Jiang training together in their sort of like makeshift gym, like learning, oh, this is full range of motion. I should probably, instead of stopping at the active range of motion where I can't physically pull my arms back anymore, just allowing the stretch to actually happen. And I realized I was like, okay, this is probably a good idea to train. And even if you guys go back to like 2020, my technique is nowhere on snuff, up to snuff as what it is right now. But 2020 was probably when I started learning full range of motion training. And then I carried that with me for probably 2020 to 2023. And I think I saw a ton of progress, at least from that period. Um, and then my last diet, so between 2021 and about 2023, still under the tutelage of Tiago, we started running more lower body specialization phases. And I went from someone that didn't really have legs to someone that I guess kind of has legs between 2021 to 2023. And it was a little bit, I was like, oh shit, I've been in the gym for a long time. And if I can improve this much, like, okay, let's see where I can take this. And to kind of like tie everything together, when I initially started working with Tiago, I turned 29 over the summer. I think I was 23, 24 at the time. And I sort of told Tiago, I was like, hey, I kind of want to put all my eggs into this for at least the next couple of years. And if I do have potential at the end, I want to step on stage. If I don't look that great after this time, I just want to be sort of like a general lifestyle client and make my body sort of like a billboard for like health, right? Because I'm a big fan, at least, of if you're a personal trainer, you should probably look the part. You don't have to be like Phil Heath or anything like that, but you should probably look like you work out here and there, right? So um, fast forward all the way up until 2023, and I had a trip to Jamaica in August. So we started dieting for that in April. And from the get go, we like picked on the burners like pretty fast. And my rate of loss per week was probably 1.5 to about 2 pounds a week. So it was a fast cut. About 210 all the way down to about, I think my lowest weigh-in was, or no, 213 was my highest weigh-in, and 185 was my lowest weigh-in after that. And that was done in the span of, I think, 16 actual weeks of dieting. So 2 5-to-1 accumulation to deload mesocycles and 1 6-to-1. And then I was getting all this sort of like negative side effects of like dieting down, like sleep disruption, um, just kind of feeling like a zombie, like definitely much more food focused than what I needed to be, and looked great for my trip, right? And I think the lowest my calories got were about 2,500, and I ran that for about, I think, 2 or so weeks. And then the last half of the week, I was like, I might die if I might not be able to make it through the week if I do this. So I was like, okay, my Tiago was like, let's stop the cut. And I was like, no, 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 I ain't no bitch. And I was like, why don't we take a 250 calorie jump and let's finish this off. So ended up finishing off the diet, and went off to vacation, had a great time. My maintenance calories at the time were projected at 3,500. I went from 187 consistent average to like a 191. And it was probably a combination of my projected maintenance was probably too high, and like just me filling back out. But I want to say I spent most of this past September like kind of hungry the whole entire time, even off 3,500 calories. My current calories are around 37 to 3,800. And these past 2 weeks have kind of been like the first 2 weeks where it's like my appetite has returned back to normal. And I'm able to eat a meal and be like, I don't need another meal of the same dimensions to feel full anymore. So that's been kind of a win. And this is one of the situations I'm actually pretty proud of myself this year, because in previous years, exiting out of a diet probably wasn't the best. Like, I definitely had a little bit of like binge eating and all that sort of stuff. But this year, I was like, I'm going to stick with this amount. I'm not going to let anything like sort of like ruin all the hard work that I sort of put in. And I was actually able to do that. So for all you guys that are like thinking that it's been a perfect journey, at least for me, it's like, no, I've had my fair share of fuck ups in terms of like eating disorders, and also sort of like things where I went wrong in the training aspect as well. But nothing, I don't want to scare anyone. I don't think it actually was like a full blown issue with like anorexia. My food relationship with food has always been pretty good, but definitely bingy sort of episodes, exiting the diet, so to speak. And in August, I sort of realized at the end of my last night, I was like, hey, like I was getting some feedback from, I work out at, I'm crazy, but I have 2 gym memberships. I work out at a commercial gym. I work out at a kind of like a hardcore bodybuilding gym. And the owner, one's a NPC judge, and his wife, they co-own the gym. She is actually, I'm not sure if she's actually in the Olympia this year for figure, but she is an Olympian for the figure division. And she's crazy jacked. But I had I think his name is Tom, look at some of my pictures coming down or throughout the diet. And he was like, he's like, if you wanted to, at least for men's physique, you would stack up pretty well against like guys who are enhanced in the NPC. And he's like, if you bring up your legs, I think you should just compete in classic in the NPC. And he was more or less kind of staring like, hey, you should do this. Like, let's go. Like, you could probably compete this year if you wanted to. And I was like, no. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to wait until 2025. But I was getting a fair bit of feedback, and actually had a consultation with Jared Feather too. And it was just a lot of like positive accolades, like, hey, yes, like you actually can do this. And I was like, okay. And that's why I'm also super thankful towards Tiago. It's like he took someone that was kind of like an average Joe-ish to someone that actually could compete in physique sports. And I realized that after that, and he was super, super busy too. So I know that he wasn't going to be able to help me with like the posing, the necessarily peaking for the show and that sort of stuff. So then reached out to Steve, got started with Steve like end of August. I am wrapping up my first mesocycle this week with him. And I think, and so far it's been an awesome experience. I really, really like the way that he does things. And it's his style of training is allowing me to get back to my roots a little bit more, which is very close to failure all the time with I would say a moderate amount of volume, not so much high anymore. And I feel great doing it. And yeah, that's kind of my synopsis, I guess.
Yeah, dude, I appreciate it, because one thing that I was thinking about as I was, I saw you on Instagram, amazing technique, knew that you're a trainer. So I was like, what a perfect candidate for the podcast. But I was like, damn, like through the page, I don't really know a ton about Eric. So definitely good for anyone that's looking to, learn more about you, maybe looking to work with you and understand your background and what all you do. Great,
Right.
great recap there. And so many similarities, man. I started out with the Candido 6-week program back in the day. Yeah, all the college shenanigans with the dining halls, it just brought me back, man, fond memories. And over so I went to Ohio State, and we had like this group of guys that was like the bodybuilders, right? And like I wasn't really a part of that, but like they all were like fucking grown ass men still like going to the dining hall. So like it was like freshmen and then these big ass dudes, because like we had some good food, and like you could
Yeah.
just go like unlimited times, right? And
Right.
they would just all sit at the fucking table together and just be like lewd as hell. And I would just like eventually like sit with them from time to time, or just like overhear their conversations. Shit was hilarious. It brought me back, man. And yeah, your transition into physique is something that I want to pull it up real quick. Make sure the P hub's down. I'll pull up your Instagram real quick, because I want to show all the people what we're working with here, because I was pretty impressed by recent photos, recent training. Then yeah, I definitely want to talk about your training as well. So let me get this pulled up real quick here, if I can figure out how to share the screen. Also, real quick, we got to get some footage for the vlog, bro. Say what's up to the vlog, Eric.
What's
There it
up,
is.
guys?
Dope, dope. Okay, time to share the screen. There it goes. Where'd my browser go? There it is. Maybe? Yeah, can you see yourself?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Literally, can you see yourself? Alrighty, let's get into it, man. I'm impressed by this, bro. Holy shit. 192, looking stacked, man. Oh, I thought there was wait, let me go back, because I think was there another shot, or was that the only shot?
There was another shot. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. Yeah, dude, that's impressive. Your traps are fucking nuts.
I have never done a shrug. That is all just from deadlifting. Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like kind of like being critical of myself. Like I think for me at least, that lower lats, sort of like spinal erector region, that needs to come up fair
Mm-hmm.
bit, and also just like I'm 5'11", and I
Mm-hmm.
have femur lengths that are like the length of a giraffe. So continuing to fill those out, I think is going to be really, really important to me doing
Yeah.
well. And like, I've quickly realized that like my chest, my shoulders, even my arms, I don't need a lot. I was cracking a joke. I was like, I'm doing 4 sets of triceps a week right now, and I'm progressing.
Mm-hmm.
My biceps, I think, are at like 9 or 10 sets per week, and like
Mm-hmm.
I would still like to bring those up a fair bit, but in terms of hierarchy of importance, like it's
Right.
definitely going to be like lower mid back and also sort of like legs that need to come up.
Yeah, dude. I like it. I like the thoughts there. So real quick, I want to just find a training post. Is this a good one, do you think?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So a couple things that caught my eye right off the rip. And for people that are watching on YouTube and Spotify, sorry for those that are listening on Apple Podcasts. It's time to upgrade, or go over and check out the YouTube. That's where it's at. But you can see my man's got clean form, controlling those eccentric movements, good standardized technique, the use of pads for extra ROM. Look at
So
that
not to
scapular motion. Sorry, go ahead.
This machine is so terribly designed. Like, I don't know if you guys can actually see how small that pad is, but the pad is small and also doesn't have a lot of padding on it at the same time. So it literally feels like someone's caving in my sternum if I don't use the pad. So it's in part due to increasing the range of motion, but also at the same time, if I were to use this machine with the same amount of weight that I currently have on it, I would probably break my sternum doing that
Mm.
because it is painful. But I'm quickly learning. I've never been a huge fan of Matrix, but
Matrix fucking sucks, bro.
their hack squat isn't terrible if I
Yeah.
modify it with some yoga blocks. And the reason that I actually like this row with a modification is like if you guys look at that lever arm, it is completely horizontal at the bottom, which overloads that
Woo.
lengthened position by a ton. And there's that intracranial pressure. I pop out
You
my
lost that
earphones.
AirPod, bro.
Yeah, yeah, that happens a lot.
Damn.
But there's such a nice drop off between the stretch position and the top that it does match the, I guess, the strength profile of, or whatever that terminology is, of your back pretty nicely. So
Yeah.
it feels really good for lengthened partials as well too. And
Look,
one
my
thing
dude's
that Steve
fucking Myron over you, right over there. You see that? You see that? I saw it. Sorry, go ahead.
One of the things too that I've started, or Steve has started having me do, are lengthened partials, which I think are great, especially in terms of back, at least for side delts and also calves too.
Mm.
It's just like I find full ROM calf training just not productive for me, versus like lengthen doing a lot of my work from lengthened partials. That seems to definitely not only improve my ankle mobility, but also at the same time um,
Yeah,
elicit some more growth, so to
definitely.
speak.
And dude, the lengthen partials with this attachment in particular are just nuts. Big
Yes.
fan of
Oh yeah.
that.
Oh yeah.
So what's your split?
So right now I'm on 3 full upper sessions and 2 full lower sessions. So I'll go upper, lower, upper, rest, upper, lower. And then
Nice.
this upcoming meso, we're looking at 3 dedicated, or 3 sessions of legs per week. So I have no idea how Steve's going to lay that out. I submitted Steve my thoughts based on how I recovered this past block. So I kind of put in for myself like a full body session, and then just an upper session the next day, and then a full leg session a day off, and then another leg session, and then an upper session, something like that. But I am kind of I really like figuring out programs, at least for myself too. And so I like kind of submitting what I think would be a good mesocycle and having like my coach pick that apart. I don't want to come off as someone like, this is how I want to be coached, but it's just like, hey, this is what I think would be a good idea based on what happened this mesocycle. Like, let me know how wrong I can be, so to speak.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, dude. I'm right there with you. You doing the work for
but
your coach.
yeah, a little bit, but it doesn't feel, for me, it doesn't feel like work. It feels like, oh, like, all right, let's actually test whether you've actually learned anything from the past walk or not. So,
Yeah,
but
yeah, dude. Um, want to hit on the lengthened partials before our poverty Zoom break. I'm a big fan of lengthened partials, and I think, one of the big criticisms I see is that it's hard to standardize your technique for tracking purposes. But I feel like it's not, like, as you were doing on that pull down, like you're halfway just about every time, right? For a lateral raise for me, I'm like halfway just about every
yep,
time. And I'm
yep.
like, yes, maybe over time that starts to go here, and that's when I would stop the set. But how do you approach that for your length partial work?
So Steve actually kind of came at me on my this was like my overreaching week, so I'm just submitting all my form updates to him, and he was like, your range of motion fell off a little bit on my lat pull down. So typically I use like landmarks. So if I'm doing like a pull around, there's on the high road, there's like a handle that's right here, and if I know I'm meeting that handle, like I'm good. On the length and partials for the mutual grip pull down, it was supposed to be at eye level, but like uh, I was so cooked from I think I had 5 or 6 sets of back before that. And by the time that I got to that set, I was just like, I'm just going to pull as hard as I can. It's going to end where it's going to end. And like, we'll take our break, but that is actually something that I want to sort of get into a little bit more. So kind of piggybacking off of what you said in terms of length and partials, I think it's just like anything else. Sometimes like you'll see the Renaissance periodization guys say like, okay, if you on a seated leg curl, you have to ding the machine for it to count as a solid rep versus having like a hard stop. You just kind of like, it's a little bit more of like an estimate of like where in the concentric that you sort of feel you really, really hit that wall. And that's where I kind of tend to stop. Um, and my one caveat to this is if you've been lifting for less than I want to say like 5 years, don't even worry about this. And I mean like 5 years of consistently tracking your workouts, consistently tracking your nutrition. If you're under that, do not do this. Learn like you guys need to all learn the rules first before you can go about sort of breaking them. We're kind of at like this. I think of resistance training as kind of like drugs, right? If you're sick, um, the longer that you do this or the more serious illness that you need, the higher dose or the more targeted approach that you need, right? So if you have a cold, you don't want chemotherapy, you want fucking Tylenol or like Motrin, right? It's the same thing with lifting weights. Like, you don't want to be advanced because like if I could get away with growing all portions of my back from doing pull-ups, flat pull downs, like just your conventional exercises, which I have been doing for the past, I want to say over close to about 15 years. I haven't done a single sort of like iliac pull down up until this year. Um, I don't think you guys need to get fancy with your training. Focus on the basics. Just get really, really good at the basics. Get kind of strong at the basics. Like I don't want to see people complaining about back development if you can't do 10 strict like pull-ups, you know. So don't try to like what's the saying? Don't miss the forest for the tree, sort of saying. But going back to that, besides my tangent, but going back to sort of like length and partials, I frankly, this is the first mesocycle, and I thought it was going to be a little bit weird, but um, I've always been a little bit more intuitive with this sort of stuff. And it was like, okay, if I'm increasing the weight or if I'm keeping the same weight, because I made a stupid mistake on length and partials for laterals. I was like, oh, hey, I'm going to load extra weight on this. And my reps went from like 15 to like 8 with the length and partials. And it was like, that's not really the point of this. Like if you do your regular work, your length and partial should be around the same reps to get the same stimulus, right? With roughly the same load. And what I found is it's really for each length and partial that you do, you contract as hard as you can. And it's when that sort of range of motion sort of drops, or when that sort of your strength in that concentric, almost you feel like you hit that wall, that's where you want to let the eccentric sort of start back up and keep on going with your reps, so to speak. That is, I feel like that is a skill that's kind of learned, I guess, but at least that's how I approach my length and partial work. Um, Curious to see how you do it.
Yeah, I would say very, very similar approach. Man, just in general, like I do feel like at a certain point, like I agree with the critique that Steve has, right? Like there has to be some type of standardization with the length and partials. And
Yeah,
I think he's right to say like, hey, like this got a little sloppy. That's
yeah,
something that I'm critical in my own training as well. But at the same time, yeah, just like the standardization and tracking things, I see people kind of like touting that, and I'm like, are you just like wrapped up in the RP dogma, or like what's the deal here? Because a stimulus is a stimulus at the end of the day, and if you can get a better stimulus by using a tool, why
right,
not do it? And
right.
that's just something that's, yeah, been on my mind
And
lately.
and to add on to that too, what Steve was actually telling me was if you guys look at some of my bent row footage from when I was using the barbell, it's like you can't make it any more. Not to stroke my own ego, but I could not have made it more strict than
I'm
that.
gonna pull
It
it
was
up real
like
quick.
zero leg drive. I think there's a video of me, I think bent rowing a couple pounds above my body weight. But
Is this a good one?
go no,
Oh,
if
no,
I
it's a
was bent rowing
deadlift.
that, I'd be in the IFBB, bro.
Where's the bent row?
Keep going down, keep going down, keep going down. It'll be before my trip. Right there, right there. Go about. Yep, that one.
Hell yeah. Talk me
So
through it.
So during this, I'm literally thinking about just using my hamstrings and glutes as stabilization. And it's like the whole entire time
Yes.
I'm thinking, if I'm going to let go of that bar, I should be able to fall on my ass at any times. And I'm like a hard torso to parallel sort of individual. And then I just modulate how much knee bend to the point where I kind of feel like my glutes and hamstrings are much more loaded. But I want to say this, as good as this looked, I could crank through 4 sets of this and get minimal pump and minimal disruption. I think doing the bent row was a good sort of exercise in coordination and total body strength, as well as an exercise on bracing. But I
Mhm.
think for me, at least in terms of back stimulus, it I have to use something that's chest supported.
Yeah.
Even and maybe this is the reason why my lower back doesn't have as much density as it could. But I find even on cable rows, my limiting factor isn't my upper back or my pulling, or I guess my lats, my traps and whatnot. It's my lower back on any sort of cable row movement. So since as a result of that, I'm a huge fan of anything that is chest supported because that actually allows me to feel like, hey, I'm taking the target musculature towards failure, so to speak.
Yeah.
And I know you guys will probably be like, well, Eric, hold on, like, why don't you use Versa grips or anything like
No, I
that?
was
Like,
about to say you're a savage for not using Versa grips.
Versa grips on, especially on a horizontal bar for me, just don't feel good. Versa grips on a dumbbell feel really, really good. And
Mm-hmm.
so I came from playing basketball, so I have so much more, what is it, pronation on my right wrist versus my left. So on a bar, like barbells just don't feel that great for me because I have so much extra range of motion in terms of wrist flexibility on my right side compared to my left. My left side feels kind of stiff. And so just barbell pressing or even barbell rowing overall just never has felt that great to me. But I came from like I would throw in bent over rows if I didn't hinge twice a week. But one of my personal preferences, if I'm doing training legs 2 times a week, I would rather have 2 hinges in a weekly on a weekly basis versus like one hinge and like a bunch of leg curls on the other day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure like everybody kind of has these movements, but hip hinging for me feels like that fits my body like a glove. It's probably something to do with like my torso length and femur length, but squatting feels like shit. Squatting has always felt like shit for me, but hip hinging, like I can do that stuff all day. It's like I cock my hips an inch back and it's like boom, perfection. Versus squatting, I am thinking about where I am in space every inch on the way down, to the point where it's like if I'm not in a machine squat, it's like my brain is tired after a set of heavy SSB squats, heel elevated SSB squats, more than like my quads, my legs, or anything like that. Like my physical mental power, like you might see steam coming off my head from that, but I'm thinking so hard of like where I need to push my knees out, where my hips go, where to keep pressure on my feet, all that sort of stuff. So to kind of like sum this up, I think once I think learning what feels good for you early on is definitely a good tool to have. But with that being said, too, sometimes you got to do shit that doesn't feel good, especially in the beginning. Because if you're under a year of training, hell, probably a bicep curl doesn't feel good to you. Because you don't know what muscle you're turning on at all. I've seen people do bicep curls, and the only thing that they get is front delts. But like even keeping the arm at their side, that's like that's beside the point. Kind of to quote Coach Cassim, at least, it's like if your client is doing something that is biomechanically correct, but they're feeling it in some weird place, it's not that big of a deal. Like just keep it pushing. Like even speaking from experience, I've had a client execute perfect reps on a barbell RDL, like high hips, stable knee position, torso to parallel, pausing, coming back up. And I ask her, hey, where did you feel that? And she'll say her quads. And I'm like, okay, I'm just not going to say anything. And she'll point to the front of her thigh, and I'll be like, okay. I was like, I just want to know if your lower back isn't screaming at you at the end of this, and you actually feel most of your stimulus coming from below the belt, you're probably fine. Because there's no chance in hell that you're bending down with a 100-pound bar, like going into hip flexion with a relatively straight knee, and your hamstrings aren't working. Like I don't care if you feel it in your quads or not. Like If your lower back isn't screaming at you, there's nothing mechanically that you're doing incorrectly. You're probably fine. Don't worry about it. Let's keep going.
That's
But
an interesting
uh,
one.
yeah, yeah, it is. She's actually she's in her 70s and is like a masters, like elite masters rower. So she's like this woman is, I'm so impressed by her every single time. I'm like, hey, when I'm 70, I want to do the things that you're doing. Like she'll do like Bulgarian split squats with like 20 pounds per hand. Off, I don't know if you know what DC blocks are, but they're those 2 inch sort of like deadlift blocks that you can drop a ton of weight on. She'll do like deficit Bulgarian split squats, 20 pounds per hand for sets of like 8 to 10. And like within 2 or 3 sessions, she got up to like a 95 pound like barbell RDL. And this lady's no more than 110, 115 pounds sopping wet. I was like,
Ugh,
what? Yeah, yeah.
fuck.
So, and I was just like, okay, if on a hinge, if your lower back doesn't feel like it's screaming at you at the end of the set, like it should feel like it's working. Don't get me wrong, but if it doesn't feel like it's screaming at you at the end of the set, like let's load some plates, you know. So, um, sensation isn't always a indicator of effectiveness. Is I guess where I'm going with that. But
Yeah,
I
yeah,
definitely kind of going back to the bent row, and I'm not shitting on it or anything. I think for a lot of people, at least, learning to brace in a hinged position while moving your arms with a significant amount of weight is very, very invaluable. I think just having that skill is very, very invaluable. So, or valuable at least. And even though it might not provide the best stimulus, I think you developing at least somewhat, I don't know, strength standards, like being able to at least bent row up more than half of your body weight for like a set of 10 to 15, I think you're that is a pretty reasonable goal for you to work, most general trainees to work up to.
mm-hmm. Agree,
Um,
man. Yeah. Do you think you learned like the bracing stuff from your powerlifting days, or is that something that was a more recent thing for you?
so bracing, so okay, so down the rabbit hole we go again, but um, for a while in powerlifting, at least, I always had a butt link, and this was when people thought butt link was literally like hip cancer or like low back cancer. So, like any degree of butt link was terrible, and I want to say so. I squatted. Oh, when I doubled 405, I had butt link. I had a significant degree of lordosis in my back. And I was like, okay. And I think that's probably where some of my hip issues started. It wasn't necessarily, it was the fact that I was only driving with my quads over and over again. And probably did I have some valgus? Probably. But one of the things I learned to do, and this was at my first training job at a Boston sports club, actually, but was learning how to posteriorly tilt the pelvis. So, like the dead bug exercise and like posterior pelvic tilts, that combination helped me out a ton. And also making sure that I had proper foot pressure. I think for some of our longer limbed lifters, um, heel elevation works so well for us because we are able to distribute a bit more of our body weight back in towards our heels versus our forefoot, which allows, I think will allow for a little bit more stability. I think if you're built like a Chinese weightlifter and you're like 5'5", you can midfoot that shit all the time that you want. But for people that are a little bit on the taller stature, I think riding the heels is definitely a little bit more of a better approach. So, to make a long story short, I spent an entire year not touching barbell back squats and only doing front squats because on a front squat, it's more about sitting down than on sitting back. So I was able to maintain that stacked rib cage over sort of pelvis position much easier. And then once I did that for like an entire year or so, got fairly strong. I think I hit a 365 front squat doing that in knee sleeves and whatnot. And I learned how to properly stack my rib cage over my pelvis, and that was when the first time I figured out how to actually use my glutes. And when I went back to barbell squatting traditionally, I saw a significant jump in terms of my strength and my coordination with that. So that it was I kind of ran, and this is how I kind of learned from everything. I run myself into the ground, mess myself up, and then rehab myself, and I take everything that I've learned from rehabbing myself and then apply that in the future. And I'm sure, like, even right now, like, of course, the goal isn't to be injured. So I'm still learning what the fine line is between like training very close to failure all the time and just not fucking yourself up. Like, just this week, I'm saying like injury. You guys might not believe this, but I get aches and pains too, even based on how I train. Even though like my technique might outwardly look really, really good, I was dealing with some knee pain on the hack squat because I was actually trying to push my mobility like way past what I probably should have, and bring my feet too low on the platform. When I brought my feet too low on the platform, I was losing a little bit more heel pressure than what I would like, and my dorsiflexion left to right, my left ankle is the one that's pretty messed up. My right one is perfectly fine. So I lacked significant amount of dorsiflexion on my left side in comparison to my right. So when I'm squatting, like I had trouble pushing through my whole foot on my left, and that was eliciting some knee pain. And obviously, it wasn't bad enough because I was still able to hit 60 squats right afterwards with like 40 pounds of chain. So I was just like, it's just something to take into account and treat as like a learning experience going forward. And I think with regards to like injury prevention, you can't completely prevent injuries, but you can do things to like reduce the risk of injuries. And I think like learning proper mechanics is going to be one. You don't have to squat with a perfectly like rib cage over pelvis, but I think for most people, at least, that is your home. Like if you want to gravitate away from home because it feels better to you, like go for it, do it, but at least learn what home is before you break all the rules, so to speak. So my TLDR is learn how to do things right. If it still feels like it doesn't fit you, then you can break the rules after that. But figure out what the on paper correct version of doing something is first before you go off like doing all sorts of crazy stuff.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway, man. Dude, it's crazy how like your training evolves. And
Yes.
as great of a tip as that is, I think people just have to put the time in and
Yes.
experiment. Like that's really what it comes down to.
Yes.
But dude, great sentiments along the way. Um, like that's why I think there is so much value in like the videos that people like Dr. Mike would put out that are like picking apart common issues that someone might have in like let's say like an RDL for example. And then is that going to be
Right.
the guidebook or the rule book for every individual? No, but
No.
a lot of good gems in there. So good point on
Right.
that.
And I think one of the biggest things, and I know a lot of my audience tends to be a little bit younger than I am, so it's you can't rush this shit. I think nowadays, when at least for us in terms of high school and college, like lifting was just an activity that you did after school. Like some kids played computer games and played like GTA. Other kids played like intramural sports and whatnot. Like I lifted weights. It was just something to like take my mind off of all the homework that I had doing or whatever projects. Versus nowadays, it's more or less like a means to an end, and everybody wants to be an influencer. And I get that it's changing with the times. It's a great way to make money, at least when you're younger. But I think at the same time is approaching lifting weights as kind of like a means to an end versus like, hey, like let's focus on using this to better myself. Is you're kind of missing the easy rocks and trying to get all the way to I guess greener pastures when you haven't even like accepted the small wins that you can get from it. Like, hey, just this week, one of my clients was able to squat like ATG full depth, improver depth in terms of like same load as the weight last week on the bar, but much lower with the same amount of reps. That's a big win, and I feel like most of the time people are so caught up with like the visual aspect, like I want to move 5 plates on the bar, come hell or high water, that they miss it. It's like okay, like all the small things that you need to get to there, like those little tidbits of like sort of mastery is really what makes this journey so good. And I think having a coach definitely accelerates that. I think also at the same time, if you're on the younger side, take time to figure things out. There's so many like free options out there that are good, that are solid. Like I'm gonna plug my man, Coach Paris out there, balled on me, man. There's a lot of free programs. Like, if you guys don't reach out to me first, because I will probably turn you away and I'll probably point you in his direction and be like, don't pay me. We'll get his free programs. Try that shit out first. Do that for a couple of years, at least 5. And then after that, if you feel like you need a coach, fine. Like, let's talk. But those small wins in mastery, I think, are really, really what turns someone from a casual to like someone that can become a higher level physique athlete, or just like a super, super strong powerlifter, whichever floats your boat,
Yeah, yeah, dude. I should ask, do you have any like hard time cutoffs for the rest?
I got about another like 3 to 5 minutes, I think, and then I gotta
Dope, dope.
outside of it.
Yeah, dude. So I'm gonna ask you one final question, man. I appreciate
Sure.
the philosophy, the great takeaways for training. But in your own personal training, just what are a couple of tips that have helped you? Because I know when we all were our first time trainers to now, we're like, wow, this programs were dog shit. We were having people do some crazy stuff. So what has been some big revelations you've had, or what are some of the big keys of growth that you've had in your own like personal training?
Gotcha. So I'll start. I'll give you my top 3. First one is antagonistic or upper body, lower body supersets. Like, my favorite is squat and a pull, hinge and a push. You get 4 exercises out of there, and you pick which ones fit your client the best. Number 2 on the sort of programming aspect or personal training aspect is, if you don't learn anything, learn the ability to progress the same exercise 5 or 6 different levels up, and also how to regress that same exercise 5 or 6 levels down, right? Like, if you don't learn anything else, like, screw anatomy, screw all that other stuff. Of course, you should know anatomy, but at the baseline, like, the anatomy is kind of like a prerequisite if you want to actually do this seriously. But having the ability to progress the same exercise 5 levels up or 5 levels down is going to be huge. And the last one that I'll drop is, in terms of nutrition, is just to kind of be a human being and accept that you're not the same person as whoever your client is. And I tell people this right off the bat. I'm like, I'm a 29-year-old guy. I've never had kids. I'm still on the fence about having kids. I don't know what it's like to be in your shoes. Preface all of your nutritional advice with that. But this is what has worked for me, and this is what I have seen from other clients that seems to work for them. And then that will sort of knock down people's barriers first, because you're accepting the fact that you are not them and you do not know what they go through on a regular basis. But also at the same time, nutrition coaching for Gen Pop literally boils down to 3 big things. Like 4 to 6 servings of fruits and vegetables per day, protein at each meal, and the last one is my personal favorite: don't drink like a fucking fish. Done. That's it.
Dude, I love the tips. And just to quickly capitalize on that, yeah, man, like I see some trainers having people do like a single arm tricep extension or bicep curl, and like on the cables. And like, don't get me wrong, maybe there's a reason, maybe there's a time and a place for that, but geez, people are paying for an hour with you, and you got to try to get as much done in an high stimulus to fatigue and RSM in that hour.
Right.
So definitely agree there. Yeah, like if you want to be able to work with a large clientele base, especially as you're starting out, you can't really niche down right away. That's something that will happen over time. But being able to say like, oh, like we have this like row pattern. Shoot, maybe a bent over row. It's not the time for that. A seated row could work. Maybe it's not the time for a seated row, a TRX row, or some shit like that. A band pull apart. Just
Right.
having that kind of like ability
Meeting them
to
where they're at. Meeting
yes,
them where they're
yes,
at. Yeah.
yes,
Definitely.
exactly. And yeah, like that's such a mature take. I've heard so many goober trainers saying like, "Oh, everybody has the same 24 hours in a day. Like if I did it, you can do it." It's like,
No,
not quite, my guy, but
no.
dude.
And like, I'll kind of leave everyone with this: is, you, as for any personal trainer, I don't care how many hours you work, you will never be a working mom, 2 or 3 kids, working a 9 to 5 job, and also like having to take care of the household. You will never be that busy. I don't give a shit who you are, but you will never be like a mom of children, a working mom of children with like an entire household to take care of. You will never be that busy. And like
Yeah, it's
that,
crazy to think about.
so always, I guess, meet people where they're at, like just be a human being at the same time. And it's also like, I guess, pick the most bang for your buck movements. You know, like if someone comes in, your first exercise should not be a hip hinge. Get the person squatting, get the person hip hinging, do something that's going to get a large amount of muscle groups working at the same time. Go for that.
Yeah, dude. Dude, Eric, I appreciate your time, man. Felt like that was a great
You
one.
too.
Loved getting into the nitty gritty of training and into some personal training tips as well. Where can the people find you?
I am in a personal training called PEX in Needham in Massachusetts, and I'm pretty sure that none of my followers are in Massachusetts. But if you guys ever make your way out there, I am there. So hit me up.
Beautiful. And in your Instagram handle?
Wurrito WURRITO 1994.
Awesome.
That is me.
Anything else you want to plug?
No, that's it. Thanks for having me
Perfect.
on, David.
Yeah, thank you so much once again. Thank you all for listening. Go do all the YouTube, the review things. We'll keep it short here with this one, but I appreciate you guys for listening, and we will see you in episode 77.